and making little mini presentations. I don't think the screen shared. But you guys were working on those mini presentations. There we go. For late antiquity.
Thank you.
Yeah. See, here's the thing is like, Grace, you can't see this, but you guys can. You see this little X? When it's white, it means the screen sharing. But today it's been white and it's not been sharing.
Oh, is it red?
No, it doesn't go red. It goes white. It's like clear when it's not sharing. Yeah. It's been tricking me today. Anyways, you started your presentations. So today we're going to listen to those. Remember, this is not graded. This is just for feedback purposes. Your next one is going to be graded. So this is practice. Yeah, it's 2 weeks from now. Ish. From now-ish. About 2 weeks before that happens. So we are going to go in chronological order. I don't remember who was first. Who was first? Okay. Awesome. Do you want to, how do you want to do this? Do you want to log on to a Google account, email it? Do you have slides? You don't even need slides if you don't want to. Okay. All right. So did you use PowerPoint or Google? Okay. Then you can just log on to your Google account. I forgot how to log out. There we go. Sorry. I'm barely functioning today.
Every day, yeah, something cool. It's like, how do you have apparently find jeans in like drawers?
I think that on Sunday,
Oh, okay.
so I know I'm done something.
Yeah, I used to like put in bags and like just have my daily like I just open it. I'm up.
We get on Sunday and then.
Doesn't work though.
Like empty, and I have it by day.
Yeah.
And then take out like the jewelry.
I'm like super OCD, so my daughter just rings.
It's crazy. But then I got to the point that I don't want to think about that anymore.
Yeah. Fun morning.
So I'm doing Hieroglifs and Jewish art. I'm going to start with the art first. This is the painting, wall mural of Samuel anoints David. It's a wall illustration of the book of Samuel. One thing to notice, it lacks volume and depth. And I also lack shadows. It's very stylized gestures and I lack motion. They also have expressionless features too. And then here's the architecture. It's a Christian community house. It's a remodeled home turned into a place for Christian gatherings. It has a courtyard, meeting hall, and baptistry. It accommodates about 70 people at a time. There's a raised platform where congregation leaders stood and sat. And it's decorated with the oldest known Christian iconographical program. And here's a summary. It's religious-based art and architecture. Murals and paintings lack depth and it's stylized. And architecture is made for religious gatherings. Rooms made with specific purposes for religious practices and decorated with art.
Yay! We got all the main points. Yeah, so super fun.
Thank you.
Those are all the main points, and it's gonna be a common throughout. It was next. I don't remember.
I think I was next.
Grace.
Okay. I think it's Grace. Okay, Grace.
Yes, ma'am.
You can screen share. So let me.
Oh, I
share.
think I sent you an email with a link to the
Okay.
presentation.
That works too.
And if that doesn't work, then I'll screen share.
Like that works too. There we go. I have it. Is it?
I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I
I
might
have to add
actually
that.
not remember my
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, Grace, you didn't give me access to it.
Oh,
That's
let's see.
Or, if you look at your screen, you can do it yourself, and that way you don't have to wait on me to change slides either. You see on the screen this little button that I'm hovering around?
Yeah.
That's a screen share. So if you just
Oh,
click
wait.
it,
Oh, cool. Share screen.
yeah. Mhm.
Microsoft Teams. All right.
Did you share
Hopefully
it?
this
There we
works. If it doesn't,
Yeah,
I'm
There we
sorry.
go. We are screen sharing. Yes, it is. You're good. Yay.
So I had the catacombs and funerary art. So for Roman customs, the dead were required to be buried outside the city's walls. And oftentimes you would have confraternities, which meant that groups of people would pile money together to ensure that they all had a place within the catacombs. Initially, modesty was the idea of what they wanted for them. But as they started to build, it became very apparent that that was going to go out the window. And as long as there was room to build, they would continue to extend the catacombs. And storing the dead underground was convenient and typically traditional for like the Christian ideas. Some of the architecture that's worth noting is the loculi, which are like stacked openings that you see in catacombs where they would place the sarcophagi. The cubicula is like mortuary chapels, so people who are visiting could go in there and pray or worship, visit their relatives. And then you see the lunettes, which were semicircular frames. Style and technique really didn't vary much. You still saw a lot of traditional styles, but the subjects of the painting changed. There are a lot of depictions of biblical stories, especially Jonah and the whale. There was a mix of both Old and New Testament stories and a combination of paganism and Christianity. So in the mural that we see, Peter and Marcellus, of the catacombs in St. Peter and Marcellus, it's a depiction of Jonah and the whale, but it has a stylized feature to it, whereas instead of a whale, it's depicted as like a sea monster, and that was a way for the Romans to kind of add their own culture to it. But the story itself is a depiction of being at God's mercy. So burial for the dead, in accordance to Christian beliefs and the importance of preserving the body, often meant that they were placed in sarcophagi. They were very ornate, often decorated with high reliefs and figures that were shown praying. The example that I chose with the sarcophagus of the philosopher, the ornate, and the Old and New Testament scenes. There are like a blend of the Christian ideas and motifs of like the lambs and Jonah and the whale, as well as the philosopher that you would see in Greek architecture. And then a lot of the times the catacombs served as a place for martyrs, saints, and prefiguration, where like prophets or like forerunners to prophets were often buried. Eventually, when the church was approved and legalized, churches were built atop the catacombs to allow people for open worship. Those who died before the legalization of Christianity were held on a pedestal in society and declared saints. And in a lot of the catacombs, you will see biblical motifs within art, and that becomes more apparent even outside of it. So Jesus as the shepherd, Jonah and the whale, the idea of being at God's mercy and Christ are very common themes. One thing to know is that statues and large figures do not become very common anymore later on as the age progresses. But yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Grace. Yeah, that hit everything too. You guys are doing a lot better this time, but I mean, I expected them because you're a little bit more used to it now. So very good. You guys were next, right? How do you want to do it?
I certainly do.
Okay. Let me set that up. Let's see. I'm trying to make sure it actually, okay, it did not share. That's what I'm making sure of before I hand it over.
So for ours, we had the architecture and mosaics. For mine, I chose to look at the Santa Costanza. For this one, it was originally built in the mid-4th century CE, initially as a mausoleum to Constantina, the Emperor Constantine's daughter. With this building, we begin to see the architects stray from the common themes or the common traditions. Whereas regular basilicas would have been built with that rectangular design, this building is built on a central plan, meaning all of the different sections and portions of the building are as equal to each other as possible. This building does have an ambulatory, which is a ring-like barrel vaulted corridor that is separated with a dozen pairs of columns. With this, we do see some representation and some symbolism. The actual ambulatory itself was meant to represent Earth, and we see this a lot in the mosaics that are on the ceiling there. They have like trees, plants, animals, even some Old and New Testament figures, as well as still some pagan figures there. It's also darker than the central domed cylinder. And then on the cylinder, in the cylinder itself, we see that they have windows surrounding the top, which was meant to let in the natural light, which was also kind of representative of God's presence. And we can't see it in this picture, but on the ceiling up at the top, there would have been more of a celestial picture going on up there with that mosaic. Although it was adorned with mosaics, a lot of them were lost or incorrectly restored, so we don't know initially what they would have looked like. And they did sort of keep with tradition on the outside of having it just be bricks, a brick exterior.
Yeah, so I picked, well, it's called The Miracle of Loaves and Fishes. This is the story about Jesus feeding 4,000, 5,000 people with 2 loaves and 2 fishes. Describing kind of the imagery of that on Jesus' left would be like Peter and James. And on the right, I believe it was, or on the right, they don't really know. I know one of them would be like John the Baptist descendant. The other one, they don't know. So this is really interesting. The reason why the gold background is because of where it would be placed inside the architect, where the light would glow and beam and start to showcase, you know, the brilliance and the reflection of the light down to the inside the congregation church. Yeah, definitely designed to see from a distance because of that. Very, it shows Jesus with, purple and the gold, which back in, if you look back in history, like the Egyptians, the purple and the gold represented like super royalty. So them bringing that and picture with Jesus without a beard, showing him as like a wealthy, prosperous person, trying to, I guess, get people to come. Andrew and Peter, hey, it's on there. I don't know. Just go off my head. But I mean, most of them at this time frame on the mosaics were the meeting. They had like a glass type portrait to use that reflection where they place it, all that. But like she said, there's not a lot of meanings, so kind of bland in general. But it doesn't really show any depth. I mean, it's just there. What else would you like me?
No, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you guys. Great. Yeah, I'll say my comments until
Yeah,
you're done. But yeah,
So far, so good. Last one. How do you want to do it? Okay. Let me
One more
log
point.
out then.
They were trying to portray the spiritual over people.
Yeah.
There we go.
any more helpful this time?
Me? What? In presentation?
Yeah.
Last time I did with the dude from South Africa. How hard? The only one that did work.
Yeah.
I did all. But they didn't know anything about it.
No, I know the first time here.
Oh, and here. I was like,
No, that one,
the
yeah.
other one, I was with two guys that didn't even help me.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I love that
I
one.
like colors.
I love that one. And you love that.
Yeah.
So first of all, I just want to say that there's some words that are hard to pronunciate. So
I can't pronounce that.
Again.
bear with me with that. Okay. Okay, luxury art is a term minor artists give to adopted during the late antiquity. And being a minor artist means that you made yearly metalwork in 40s, among other crafts. There's also the major artists. Those are the ones that made sculptures and paintings. And being a luxury artist means that you will employ the costly materials, which are gold and silver. And there's an example of minor artist who I cannot pronounce that
I
name.
can't even know where I got it.
Who was that in the Jim Carter of Emperor?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do something.
Okay, in 1942, a farmer discovered in Maidenhead, England, 34 silver pieces, including bowls and platters and spoons. But the most spectacular item was a large platter, which is known as the Great Fish, which is this one. So in the center of the platter, There's the head of the god Osiris. And next to them, the next circle is mirrors, which are nymphs. And here is a band that is celebrating. Yeah. The band is celebrating the consumption of wine and featuring drinking contest between Bacchus and Hercules. Bacchus is the one that is resting on a panther, while Hercules is the one that is so drunk. And two satyrs are helping him. Yeah, okay. The great dish represents the sea god and a drinking contest between Bacchus and who was the god of the wine and Hercules. And yeah, most of the the creation of all the items that were found consist in classical mythology.
Yeah, that was fun. And kind of a great example of the fact that all of the rest of you are probably are human.
It's a good example of the fact that even though all of the others are Christian, like literally every single other person talked about something with Christian iconography, it doesn't mean everyone did it. There was still mythology that was going on and that people chose to depict. So the Mausoleum of Constantine is a great example. One of the mosaics there depicts cupids with grapes referencing Dionysus.
Is that the one that's like kind of like in
Yeah.
pieces? Okay.
Yeah. So it's just a good example of the fact that yes, even though Christianity is popular, there's still people that are sticking with those pagan themes.
Yeah.
So
Don't you have the Irish right above it that are all fading at this time? Or is this?
the Irish are
Yeah.
super pagan. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
get to them next week.
Yeah, okay, because I was like, don't you have all
Don't
that
worry.
influence right there?
Your book does something weird where it sticks with Rome for a while, and then next week we'll take a detour into Islamic art, but we'll go all the way to like 1500 in Islamic art, and then we're going to backtrack again,
Backtrack down to
back to the Irish warlords.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And then we'll figure out what's happening in like that region all the way up to like when we stopped here. But in summary for that chapter, it's all about how Christian art really changes art in a nutshell. So mosaics become really, really popular. They're used as ways to engage the mostly illiterate people with pictorial narratives. And that's going to continue on for a long time because people are illiterate for a long time. We do, I don't remember if you mentioned it, but we do lose large statuary around this time period. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Was it Grace that said that? One of you guys said that, and that's a good point. We won't see large statuary being created again until sometime towards the end of next week during the Romanesque era. So it's going to be a while before we see that. They prefer mosaics in this time period. There's a lot of theories as to why they did that, but no specific reason behind it. Yeah, we'll talk about that next week. But once again, not all mythological subject matter leaves. A lot of times they try and combine mythology and Christian. I can't remember who said that one either. One of you guys mentioned that they combined mythology and Christian art. I think it was you, right? In yours? Yeah, the Jonah one.
Yeah.
Or was that Grace? I don't remember. Anyways, but you all did really good with your presentations because you brought up the main points of everything. that we needed to cover for that chapter in a nutshell, which I appreciated. Thank you. Anyone have comments about late antiquity art? It sucks. Brandon said it sucks. I don't know if I agree or disagree.
You don't.
Because, yeah.
I thought it was kind of cool. Like, one thing I didn't mention was a lot of, even though a lot of the mosaics still had, you know, New and Old Testament themes and also Roman themes, they were still up for like Christian interpretation.
Yeah.
For the one where they're harvesting grapes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
a lot of bipartisan.
There's a bit of more freedom for interpretation of the texts in this time period, whereas later they are going to have set depictions for certain scenes that you don't mess with. That's how it's supposed to be shown. So it's a bit of an interesting transition period in art here. Now, what do you guys have as feedback for each other for your presentations? One of you might have noticed something.
Me.
What?
I don't know.
You know?
I didn't read off the screen.
Oh, you did not. That's why I said you improved. You didn't read off the screen this time,
No, I just,
which was good.
yeah, I just kind of.
You did really good.
Yeah.
That was smart taking your notes up here with you so that you didn't have to read off of the screen. If you're one of those people like me that reads off of the screen, which I really need to sit and make notes, but God, that would take so long.
That's why I just.
Then I would recommend doing that for your graded presentation because that was a really good idea. Grace did really good this time, but I think that's because she learned that when you're presenting online, you don't have to think about the audience as much, so it's a little bit calming. I've learned that I am a lot less nervous online than I am in person.
I don't ever get nervous.
Must be.
I don't know, unless I don't have a soul or something.
But yeah, things to think about for your actual graded presentation. If you're one of the people that reads everything off the screen, make notes. Oh, I appreciated your arrows. That was the other comment that I had. I liked the arrows that you had on your picture. That was a good idea. I had not been doing that before, so thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's a simple thing, but sometimes you don't think
I
about
never
it.
thought of that.
Yeah. So that was good. I'm trying to think of anything else as far as comments. Make eye contact with the audience. That's a big one. Makes you seem present a little bit more. Yeah, I think they were all improved from last week, so good job. Means we should do good on the graded one later. And you need to not be nervous because you did fine. But I get it. Some of those words are hard.
You should just kind of abbreviate.
Yeah, just abbreviate
Or find
them.
like a nickname for the name.
A nickname. Yeah. I do that sometimes with
Oh,
stuff.
really?
I think a lot of tongue twisters. Like, I was practicing
For
what I was
sure.
going to say this morning.
Yeah.
Oh, you
I kept like getting tongue twisted. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. I just don't even care anymore.
I literally get through my notebook and I was like, oh.
But I think we're all learning and improving slowly but surely, which is good. It's kind of the point of college.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, that takes us into chapter 9, Byzantium. You're going to see a lot of the themes continue on, like mosaics, churches, flatness. Yeah, you're going to see that continue, which I don't know. I think 2 of you mentioned that there was no depth in anything. Yeah.
It's for like
That's kind of Christian art in a nutshell. If we're looking at figurative art, it's very flat. But we're going to see a continuation of that during the Byzantium period. Like I mentioned yesterday, the Byzantium people, they didn't call themselves Byzantium. They called themselves Romans. They were still part of the Roman Empire. Names, man. named. But Byzantine Byzantine art, see, I mess up stuff too, and I speak English. Byzantine art can be divided into early, middle, and late, like a bunch of the other art movements that we've talked about this far. It follows the progression and decline of Roman Byzantium. So we're talking about the Eastern Empire of Rome. Next week, we're going to talk about the Western Empire and what happens to it. Western Empire meaning France, Spain, England, and Italy. Actual Rome. Today, we're focusing on like Turkey and Asia Minor, and parts of Africa, I think, pop up today. Don't quote me. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've done this. But yes, we're going to follow that particular side of the Roman Empire, the Eastern side, which is different from the Western side. They even adopt a different religion. We'll get into that later. But I mean, in a nutshell, we're continuing on with Rome. We'll have more Rome next week. Different kind of Rome. But where we left off, once again, just a reminder, Constantine did successfully unite Rome into one empire again after the Tetrarchs split it apart, and ends up legalizing Christianity and moving the capital to Byzantium and renaming it Constantinople. But that's where this period gets its name, is the locale of the capital. You would think it'd be called Constantine Art or Constantinople Art or something, rather than Byzantine, since it hasn't been called Byzantine in a long time. But anyway, whatever. I didn't name it. Starting off with early Byzantium, which begins with Constantinople and ends, well, Constantinople and Constantine, like the founding of that city by Constantine, and ends with Pope Leo III and iconoclasm. Iconoclasm is the destruction of icons or idols. Yeah, like I mentioned, they switch religions. Gonna lead to iconoclasm. We already discussed art under Constantine. That's kind of what that whole last section was about, late antiquity. But we are picking up today with his buddy Emperor Justinian, who follows shortly after him in 537. It's around this time that I started getting a little sarcastic with my presentations. I apologize. I start using words like mommy and daddy and buddy. So, yeah.
Cool.
Instead of like king and emperor and empress, but it's fine. It'll be okay. It's because I started getting very annoyed with the turnover rate of some things. So, yeah, I was like, I'm tired of writing the word emperor and empress. I already told you I can't spell it. So mommy and daddy.
Just use an emoji.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I'll use the emoji from now on. But yeah, before Justinian, just a little summary of some more luxury arts, since we ended on that note. Ivory carvings are another form of luxury art. Once again, like you mentioned, luxury arts involve using very precious objects as mediums, like silver, gold, and ivory. And this is a carving of St. Michael the Archangel. It is a diptych, which means it's part of two. It would have folded together. Yeah, this is just one half of it. But it is also an illumination. Illumination is a word we're going to use a lot. Illumination just means a narrative of a story in pictorial format. But here we have St. Michael the Archangel, or Archangel, whatever you want to say. He is walking downstairs. There are Corinthian columns surrounding him. It's almost like he's walking out of a Greek temple. Above him is that semicircular transept with a cross in the center. Above him, it says who he is. He is carrying the same orb that Constantine carried a few days ago, representing the world with a cross on top of it. Well, the staff, we can tell he is an angel because of his wings. But there is something weird happening with those wings. Does anyone notice, as far as like spatial wise, what's wrong with the wings? Not just skinny. Yeah. In
Going
portions, it is behind the column, and then in other parts, it's in front of the column. So the spatial relations are not correct, which bugs me. They know how to do this. They learned from the Greeks and the Romans. They know how to do it. They're purposefully choosing as a stylistic choice to get rid of spatial depth. I mean, even his feet, like walking down these stairs, his feet are like curved over. They're not flat. This curved feet position, some of you noticed on the mosaics from what you talked about. That's a common theme in Christian Byzantine art as well, to have flat feet so you can see the whole foot. It looks like you're floating. It's weird. Yeah, so there's no spatial ambiguity. Things don't look naturalistic. They don't look real. It gets worse. But yeah, this is just the start of it.
Yay.
I mean, worse depending on your stylistic preferences. If you like this, then it gets better. Yeah. I don't know what to think. More Justinian-ic art in architecture. Once again, ivories continue. Ivories become very popular. They even start making them in more than just diptychs. They'll make them in like polytyptychs, so like 5 pieces. Of course, all of the ivory pieces themselves are rather small. But the era in which Justinian is emperor is considered Byzantium's first golden age. They also have their first code of laws made by Justinian. We kind of talked about Justinian before. He was married to Empress Theodora. She was an actress. Yeah. So not royal, not wealthy. She was an actress. It was a bit controversial when they married because, you know, he's an emperor. But she is said to have been extraordinarily beautiful, and he fell in love with her and, well, married her. But we also talked about the fact that she was kind of a badass. She was the one that forced Justinian to stay when the Nika revolts were happening. Half the city burned down, and he was like, I want to give up and run away, which is what all the other rich people in town did. They all left. So he wanted to leave too. And she's like, nope, you are the emperor. You're going to take charge and fix this. And she made him, and she fixed it. He would cheat. But then afterwards, he instills that code of civil law, which has a fancy Latin name, and I'm not going to mention it. So, yeah. And then, of course, afterwards, he goes on to rebuild all of the burned down buildings, which employs a lot of people. And one of the reasons why the Nika Revolt happened was because the economy was down. People were angry. The other reason was that sporting event that I mentioned before. Anyways, most churches were being commissioned to be rebuilt bigger, better than ever. So we are going to be looking at a lot of architecture as far as churches in this section to represent, well, the trends that were happening when they were being rebuilt. And a lot of art pieces were commissioned as well, such as the Barberini ivory depicted here, which showcases Justinian as the world conqueror, even though he didn't conquer anything. Well, I mean, his underlings did. They kind of reconquered some of Roman lands that had been lost, but he didn't do anything. That's also another common theme that we're going to see. Emperors like to be shown as conquerors. So. One of the first churches that he has rebuilt after it was burned down was Hagia Sophia. This is like the quintessential architectural piece of the Byzantium era. It was originally a rectangular basilica format. It was wooden. It caught fire during the Nika Revolt, burned down. He had it rebuilt bigger than ever before, as well as more artistic with the architecture than a rectangular shape. It's still a rectangle technically, but it doesn't look like it. This is just one of the 30 churches that Justinian built, by the way. We're not going to look at all 30. Thank God. But this is probably the most impressive. and it was the most impressive architectural feat since the Pantheon, which came quite some time before this one. Oh, I forgot I turned that down.
There are a handful of buildings throughout history that have changed the way we see architecture.
And we're standing in one of them. We're in Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, what was once Constantinople.
And before that was Byzantium.
First it was a Greek city, then part of the Roman Empire, and then Constantine decided to found a city here.
Which he called the New Rome, and which came to be known as Constantinople.
Or the city of Constantine. And that happened right at the time that Constantine was recognizing Christianity. By the end of that century, Christianity would become the official religion of the Roman Empire.
The emperor had his palace close by, and that was the reason that the most important church was built here. Now, the church that we're standing in is not that original church. That burned down.
And so did the next church.
They were actually burned during riots, and the most famous riot took place in the 6th century, and it's called the Nickel Riot.
Against the emperor of the time, Justinian, and Justinian was the patron of this church.
Well, this church was a way of putting to work a lot of people in the city that might otherwise riot, but it was also a way for him to express his power across the empire.
This was one of many churches that Justinian built. This building, though, is the centerpiece of that building program.
It's unbelievable. We're standing in this mountain of a building, and in fact, to use that kind of geologic term is, I think, appropriate. One author said that standing here where we are in the sanctuary was like standing at the bottom of an enormous canyon. Now, when this was built in the 6th century, it was absolutely unique in the world, not only for its scale, not only for its ambition, but also for its design.
Justinian hired 2 theoreticians, 2 scholars who were well versed in geometry and mathematical theory and physics to think about how to vault this space. The 2 churches that were here before had wooden squares.
So I'm going to fast forward a little bit so we can actually talk about the architecture part. I just wanted you guys to see some of the interior. It is covered in marble and gold. So it was quite ostentatious for its time. But the architectural features itself are what makes Hagia Sophia so interesting. All of these columns inside are just purely decoration. They serve no support function. The thing that's actually holding up Hagia Sophia are these large piers and the pendentives. So if you notice here, Hagia Sophia is a circle on top of a square with 2 smaller semi-domes and even smaller semi-domes on the other side on top of more squares. This dome looks like it should not be up here. It looks like it should just collapse down into that square. There, that's that word, square. Which technically it should. However, these pendentives here, which look like they're the thinnest portions of the entire building, are what's holding it all up. These triangular supports, they take the pressure of this dome and push it out onto these piers. So it's actually these guys that are holding everything up. The pressure is going out into these triangles, onto these piers, and then they added these smaller half domes to even further take out the weight of the building onto the sides. So really, the weight is not up here, it's over here. So it's impressive that they thought about this before architectural schools were a thing. The idea of making these domes, the original dome was shorter and it collapsed in on itself. They learned that the taller the dome is you make, the more stable it is, because it turns into more of an arch, and then a dome. Arches, of course, are a little bit more stable than domes. So this taller dome is the newer one. The first dome ended up collapsing in during an earthquake. The minarets that are on the outside, which I'll go back, show you. Just if I can find it or not. There we go. Those minarets were added later when the Muslims invaded and turned this into a mosque. They were not originally there. It was just this building. They also redid some of the dome as well as some other features that were like decaying. So it's not all original, been changed a little bit, but it's still a rectangular floor plan, just like a traditional basilica would be, despite the fact that it really doesn't look like it is. It is. So a very, very impressive building as far as architecture. I'm going to stop that one there because it goes into talking about, well, Justinian and Theodore, the people that had this built. And we're going to talk about them more with the Church of Ravenna. So Justinian, like I mentioned, he sent his generals off to reconquer some of the land that was lost to invaders in other territories. One of those towns that he recaptured was Ravenna. When Ravenna was recaptured, the bishop there had a church built and really honoring Justinian for saving them from the invaders. I can't remember who was invading that time. I think it was the Visigoths, but I'm not sure. But yeah, that time. So you can understand why my brain's a little confused. This, like Constantina's mausoleum, is a central plan, meaning that it is a circular format with all of the main stuff happening in the middle. Hence the central plan, rather than a rectangular axial plan. However, the building itself doesn't really feel like it's on a central plan when you walk in, because they do have like aisles on the inside and a altar at one side, making it feel like it's still a rectilinear plan, even though it's not. It's weird. You'll notice, I don't remember who mentioned the brick building. It was you. So during late antiquity, it was pretty common to not do too much decoration on the outside of your buildings. It was predominantly brick. That continues on throughout a good chunk of the Byzantine era as well. So the exterior of the Church of Ravenna, also known as San Vitale, is just a brick exterior. It does have flying buttresses to take the weight off, to allow for things like this clear story and these other windows to be put in, meaning light. They could have actual sunlight instead of candles, which, like you mentioned, is kind of a symbol of God and heaven. Which, I mean, it makes sense in our brains because, yeah, light, that's a good thing. God's a good thing. Yeah. I don't know. It's weird what our brains do. Anyway, the church itself is dedicated to Saint Vitale. Saint Vitale died around that area. He'll pop up again later on in the mosaic. It is an octagonal format, obviously. I think you could probably tell from the outside. And it is entirely coated from floor to ceiling in mosaics of glittering gold. Like Brandon mentioned, gold was a popular motif in mosaics because it reflected the sunlight and just made things look even more expensive and heavenly. It's going to be a continuous theme. This shows Christ on top of, well, once again, that orb that keeps popping up as iconography, the symbol of the world. Next to him are two angels. And of course, the bishop. Well, actually, that's not the bishop. That's not the bishop. The bishop's over here. The bishop who had the entire church built, which is why you see a little miniature cartoon version of San Vitale, which is being presented to God. That's another thing that's going to keep popping up in imagery as we go forward in Christian art. Whoever had the church built, you'll see them passing it off onto God, like, hi, here's your birthday cake. Or here's your church. Hi, here you go. Here it is. You're welcome, kind of thing. It's going to keep going on. We do have his name, and oh, that's who that is. That's Saint Vitale. It's been 3 weeks since I've done this one. It takes me a second. I didn't have time to review it this morning either. I apologize. But this is Saint Vitalis over here. His name is above him. Of course, you don't need to have Christ's name above him because, I mean, duh. And over here is that Archbishop, I'm going to try and say his name, Ecclesius. Yeah. Although Ecclesias himself didn't actually pay for the church, it was a wealthy lord in the area. He just designed it. Okay, some more mosaics from San Vitale. Here we have Justinian and Theodora. There are mosaics of them. They kind of represent them figurally. Justinian and Theodora never actually went to Ravenna. But like I mentioned, this church was like kind of sort of dedicated to them since they helped free Ravenna from the invaders. But the bishop wanted them to be represented in the mosaics, like they actually went there. So here we have a procession for the Eucharist happening, which like the emperor and empress are participating in this mosaic, even though they actually never did it in San Vitale. So on this side, we have Justinian with the bread. He is surrounded by attendants as well as a different bishop. Most people think the original bishop was that Ecclesias guy. However, here you can see above him is Maximius. That was the bishop that followed Ecclesias. Most art historians think that he had it changed for him. Which I mean, it wouldn't surprise me because people like that. Now, what is something you guys notice about Justinian's mosaic that you probably can pick out thanks to other people talking about mosaics?
The gold,
The gold,
the purple.
the purple, yes. So Justinian and Theodora are both wearing gold and purple robes to symbolize they are rulers.
Oh, yeah, showcasing a lot more colors.
There are more colors in this one. Yes. You still have your gold background though. It's designed like a picture frame.
Oh, the halo.
The halo, yes. So halos are usually for gods, saints. But here emperor and empress are shown with halos to show that they were divinely selected for their jobs. Is that true? I don't know. I am not God. But they are being depicted that way. Now, another thing to note is everything is very, very flat, especially if you look at the robes and the feet. There's something interesting happening with the feet. It shows their positioning and their level. Didn't know feet would be so important, but we're talking about them a lot today. This is the third time they've popped up. So the artist has the left foot, I believe, yeah, left foot over each person to show that one person is in front of the other. But when you get to these two, the bishop and Justinian, the bishop is shown completely in front of Justinian. If you look at the feet, if you look at the bodies, it doesn't quite look like that. That is them recognizing that God is more important than the emperor and God gives the emperor his power, which is an interesting take that you don't always see. Usually they're shown as equals. From now on, they're probably going to be shown as equals or more equal. But here, there's there's reverence given to the bishop being the representative of God. But then once again, if you look at their bodies, it looks like Justinian's in front. It's weird. Now over with Theodora, you might notice that she's going the opposite way. That's because they were opposite walls. You have Justinian on one side, Theodora on the other side. And you might also notice that she's waiting outside of a door. That is because the women would follow the men through the procession. The men go first. She's waiting outside under a canopy to go in and do her thing. She's carrying the wine, by the way. So that theoretically doesn't work because you do the bread and the wine at the same time, but she goes second. You get it. But she and her attendants are waiting outside to go in for their turn. Yeah. And once again, the feet thing, it's one person in front of each other, except for Theodore is in front of everyone else. Of course, the bishop's not over there with her. Yeah, you get it. Everyone's looking directly at you. There is no depth. Literally, the only way they showed depth was stacking the feet. Yeah. And the feet are all pointed too, just like last mosaic we talked about. More mosaics. We're going to be talking about mosaics a lot. By the way, Brandon mentioned that they use terrace mosaics, which are small glass pieces. The glass would be melted into a small itty bitty little square shape, and they would be individually put into those spots. The Islamic mosaics are going to be different. So I will do a side note of that. So side note there. During Justinian's reign, monasteries were invented. Monasteries are going to keep popping up from now on too. This is just their introduction. I think we all probably know what like a monastery is, though. It's where the monks live and learn and study. Original monasteries were very separate from everything else. It was thought that if they could remain separate, they could remain like sinless and less tempted. But later on, pilgrims would go on pilgrimages, which that's another thing we're going to talk about a lot next week. And monasteries had to become larger to house the pilgrims. It was like a hotel kind of, pretty much, as well as include cafeterias for the pilgrims and the monks to eat in. And a lot of those monasteries, because they became popular like tourist stops along the pilgrimage destination way, started to decorate their monasteries a little bit more. We're going to, once again, see more of that next week. It's just going to explode next week. This is just the beginning. Here we see in one of the church's apse, I always want to say asp, but I think it's apse. But a mosaic, which normally the apse of a church, which is right behind the altar, would include a decorative motif while you are watching the priest or whoever preaching. Monasteries, I forgot to mention, also would include a church on the grounds, which makes sense, but I didn't mention it. These are things that I forgot to mention because I forget it's not normal to know that. Anyway. But this is our first example of a mandalora, which is why I chose this one, because it's going to be shown a lot next week too. Mandaloras are large blue blobs behind God to kind of set him apart from everyone else. So he's separate from the others. And this depicts the transfiguration of Christ himself, meaning when he's going to heaven. After he's been crucified. That's going to be a popular theme for a lot of mosaics and carvings in the future. But it's a popular Bible story. It's kind of like one of the big ones when Christ dies and goes to heaven, because that's when you are freed of sin. So it's a pretty popular one. But I will say here, because I think this is the first one we looked at, New Testament. New Testament becomes very popular during the Byzantine era. Prior, during late antiquity, they showed New Testament, but they prioritized Old Testament a little bit more. But that's also because Jewish faith was more prominent during that time period. It's going to slowly peter out. But yeah. And I used to know all of these guys' names, and now I don't, and I can't read Latin. Yeah, it's a little blurry. But yeah, I used to know their names. It's probably not important.
Yeah.
They're saints. We can all just determine they're saints, most likely. But yeah. Some more icons. Well, not really more. This is our first icon. More icons for me. Icons become really popular. Icons are small portable images that you can pay reverence to in your private homes or on trips, like pilgrimages. I mentioned earlier that icons are going to kind of almost become illegal. People are going to destroy them all during iconoclasm's era. But prior to that, they were gaining popularity. There were some different religious mindsets thinking that if you were praying to these images, you were worshiping the image, not the thing it's representing, which leads to a break in the church between Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox faith. And since we are in Eastern Rome right now, I bet you can figure out which one they're going to take. They're going to go with the Eastern Orthodox religion, which states that it is sinful to possess icons, leading to iconoclasm, the destruction of icons. Like all of them, like they go to churches and like burn them all. So we don't have too many. But here is an icon of Christ, well, giving whoever was praying to it his blessing. Yeah. I always thought he looked very stern. I don't know. If I want Christ's blessing, I don't.
I mean, really.
He looks disappointed.
Yeah, he looks disappointed in me. That's not what I think of when I think of like, here, have my blessing.
Yeah, no, that's.
It's the eyebrow. His eye looks bigger than the
I know one eye looks bigger. That also freaks me out.
In the side of his cheek, how they
Yes.
love.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is also a great depiction of the fact that now Christ is being shown bearded
Mhm.
with like wisdom versus younger and beardless. There's going to be shifts back and forth in time when they go back to the beardless, youthful version and then back to the bearded version. It's really, Christ can be depicted in a lot of different variations, which I'm sure you know. And we start seeing that begin around this period. Here you have the blessing Christ. Here, the transfiguration Christ. Later on, we're going to look at a very angry Christ. And then later after that, a very painful Christ. Well, not he's painful to look at, but like he's in pain. And then another one where he's a very happy looking Christ. There's different versions depending on what story they're illustrating usually that they choose to show him as. But yeah, you're going to notice that. Different versions of Christ. But yeah, one eye is bigger than the other. It weirds me out. Anyway, that takes us into the Middle Byzantine era, which is marked with iconoclasm and ends with the Crusades. So not a happy period. Starts with the destruction of icons, ends with the burning of cities. Yeah, maybe. Really bad time for Byzantium. Like I mentioned, Justinian was kind of the golden period, and then after them, it peters out. So they become attacked by Arabs that are like closing in, loosing. I wrote loosing. Wow. Okay, losing. They're losing to the Arabs. Anyways, they begin that because they think that because they're losing land to the Muslims, that God is punishing them. Well, why would he be punishing them? It's all those freaking icons. We got to get rid of them, guys. He's punishing us for them. Let's burn them. And that's what happens. That's how iconoclasm happens. People think it's sinful and all of this bad stuff's happening, so it must be that. This is not the first time in history that's happened. That's not the last time. Still happens today. A lot of people thought 2020 was like God punishing us. I kept seeing that everywhere. I could see where they're coming up with that, which is why I can see why they might think here, oh, we're losing all this land and our cities to opposing religion. We must be upsetting God somehow. I get it. It's a common thing, yeah. Yeah. What is iconoclasm? Well, it was set forth by Pope Leo III, and it called for the destruction of all icons, which you would think like, okay, whatever. But what happens is all the artists that were employed making those icons pieced out. They're like, we're going to go somewhere else where we can get paid. So because of that, for a really long time afterwards in Byzantium, they didn't have artists to do stuff like this. Paintings, mosaics, carving. They go other places where they can do that. So it's a very bad time in art as well. Artists that did stick around, they decided to use symbolism instead of icons. So showing symbols of doves, lambs, crosses to reference particular people or objects. They got smart. No, though, it doesn't last forever. Thank you. Two women. Two female regents said, heck no, we want our icon back. Their names, Irene and the new Theodora, not the original Theodora. She long died, but other people took her name because she was a good empress. So Irene and Theodora, Irene came first, ruled as regent for a short period of time, tried to reinstill the idea of icons. Then Theodora, here's where I said I was getting a little sarcastic, after her hubby died, she repealed that rule of iconoclasm and it stuck. Irene tried to do it. She wasn't ruler long enough to finish. Then later on, Theodora actually, she did it. So we have icons again. But like I said, all the artists had already left. Yeah. Yeah. We want icons again, guys. We changed our minds. Too bad. Well, eventually they were able to get artists to make icons again, but the good ones had left. So we have very different versions of icons now. I mean, you can say the good ones left, but I kind of like this one. Other than the clothes freak me out. We'll talk about why in a second. So after iconoclasm's brief reign, all of the images during that time in churches were destroyed, not just the small icons, but the big ones too. So the rulers, known as the pious emperors, redid all of the paintings and mosaics that were destroyed. Hence their name, the pious emperors. Yes. One such painting redone is well, I guess it's not a painting, it's a mosaic, is the Virgin and Child Enthroned, which it looks like they tried to do like spatial depth with the throne being put in an angle. We've talked about someone doing that before in ancient Mesopotamia, but they lost it with the clothes. Like, look how flat that is. But then once again, they added shading in the actual skin, like bodies. So it's like, make up your mind. I know, yeah, yeah. They do it now.
Yeah. The hand on the child's shoulder is also a little like.
Yeah. And his head's really small for like how big his body's supposed to be. So there's stuff that's off, but they're trying. They're still making art. Once again, still a gold background. That'll eventually go away. They have the halos, which are usual icons. Some more. This is the one. This is the one. This one. This one. This is from the church in Daphne. It is at the very center of the dome, at the top of the ceiling, and it shows Christ looking down from you. He is illuminated all around the dome with a clear story of windows. He is shown as the Panta creator, so seer and ruler of all, which is a common way for them to choose to show Christ. What do you guys think?
I think it's creepy.
He is always watching me, you know.
Yeah, I know. It's like Santa Claus.
He looks so angry.
Yeah, it's just
Like, okay,
He looks like a grumpy
okay,
old man. Like I mentioned earlier, Christ is shown in many different ways. Sometimes he's a baby.
Well, that one was like, give me your money.
Yeah. Yeah. He does look like
Tithe,
that.
give it.
Give me your money
Or
now.
I will stare at you.
Or I will send you to hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much, I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, he does. Which is weird because like it's at the top of the dome, so you think it would be looking directly at you. There's nothing off to the side. This is the only thing on that dome.
that would make it even more terrifying though. He's
Yeah.
looking straight down at you. I'm like,
Yeah.
right.
I'm glad we're having fun with Byzantine art. I had fun with these, kind of. Even though I got tired, I get tired of these, but Here's a different version of Christ. This one's fun too. Another one from that same church. Very common imagery, crucifixion. Your book does not point out the thing that I noticed. No. No, they completely bypass that. But of course, this is supposed to be like a mournful version of Mary and one of the saints. It references Golgotha with the skull down there, which is a hill of the bones or something like that. I can't remember. Called something with bones. Man. Yeah. He is on the cross. You can see the nails with the blood pouring out. Very gruesome version. I mean, there's more gruesome ones that we'll look at later, but this is the first one you looked at that shows blood coming out. You can see where the spears poked him in the side. There's blood coming out of the nails at his top. Originally, there were angels peering down, watching the scene. It's an abstract depiction, but it's also still like naturalism in a way. We've talked about before the S-shaped curves of figures. This is the beginning of that coming back. It's going to become very prominent later. Like a literal, like as curvy as I can get. This is the beginning of that. The fabric and shadowing does show some depth, but like I mentioned, it's a bit cartoonish. Like we're trying to be real, but we're also a bit cartoonish in our depiction. I always think it's weird because Mary's hand, it's supposed to be like, look, but it looks like she's like catching the blood. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
It's just impressive.
But this shows you that during the Byzantine era, there's a mixture of naturalism and abstraction that's happening with really all of these that we're looking at. They're trying to do an in-between, which is why it's so awkward. At least to me, it's awkward to do it and pick a side. I don't mind abstract art. I really don't, but don't make it in between. Here's St. Mark's Venice Cathedral, obviously super decked out. This one's really interesting because the artists that did these mosaics took time to label every figure. We talked about that with Greek pottery before too. This shows in the dome, which by the way, this thing has 13 domes. It shows the martyrdom of, well, martyrs, and of course, Christ is sitting on top of a blue orb as a pantocrator here. Mary is right directly below Christ, as well as two archangels, and then the rest of the scenery in this church is martyrs. Martyrs are people who died for their faith, like someone mentioned, I think it was Grace, later on people who died before Christianity was legal became martyrs for their faith. Almost like worshipped as idols. Most of them become saints. So yeah, all gold, very vivid. This was done, like I said, in St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice. You can still go there. You can go inside. It floods every night. It's kind of fun. Venice goes underwater partially in the nighttime. In St. Mark's floods. The catacombs underneath go completely underwater. It's fun like that. I have been there. But it was made for Anna and Prince Vladimir when they got married. Anna was from a very wealthy family in Venice. Prince Vladimir, like his name, is Russian. They end up getting married and they want to build their own version in Venice of something as grand as the Hagia Sophia. So they did this. It has 13 domes. It's covered in gold mosaic. It is quite ostentatious. Is it as big as Hagia Sophia? No. But yeah. It's going to be a theme with architectural churches. They try and outdo the Hagia Sophia. That's like the baseline. This is a church. We want to do better than that. And they really aren't able to accomplish it for a while. We're going to skip that one because it's just yet again another mosaic. This one is from Sicily. Sicily did have a lot of Islamic architecture already existing there, so you might notice this is a horseshoe arch, which is Islamic, as well as the recessed mosaic tiles at the top are Islamic. So in this particular region, there's a merging of two religions. And I am going to skip forward to this particular painting instead of a mosaic, because I'm tired of mosaics. Nerezi painting, it was in a church, as most of the things that we're talking about today are. It shows the passionate depiction of Christ's death. There's going to be an artist named Giotto in the early Renaissance that copies this. That's the main reason why I pointed this one out. Has Mary, Joseph, John, Nicodemus there at the bottom there. Nicodemus and Joseph holding onto his feet. John holding his hand. Mary holding onto her son. Quite a different version than this one.
Mhm.
Same scene though. He just died.
Yeah.
This one a little bit more compassionate, rather than look, my son is dead. Here we have a mother literally holding on to her son's dead body, crying. Even the angels above are crying. So once again, another depiction version of Christ. We're going through the era in which there's no set version yet. We'll have one later. And I'm trying to be a little selective now in what I am covering. We'll go on to late Byzantine, which if you have free time, this one's really interesting. I would check it out. There's a lot of mythology in it with Christian motifs. We'll go on to late Byzantine because class is almost done. It's marked by the Crusades beginning and ends with the Muslim Ottoman Turks invading. So it's literally the end of Rome, Byzantium. No more. So the Crusades end up happening in Byzantium because, well, they started off invading Venice, and Venice is like, hey, this is another one where I got really sarcastic. I said, yo, the people of Constantinople have a lot more money and gold. You should go bug them, which is exactly what happened. The Crusades invaded Constantinople, even though Constantinople was Christian. Yeah, Crusades were all about like spreading Christianity, for anyone that needs to know that. But they invaded Constantinople, sacked the entire place, took everything. There's a quote in your book, something along the lines of, I've never been so terrified for my life before, and to think it's not from the Muslims, it's from other Christians. But after the Crusades, well, Byzantium or Constantinople gets hit a second time by the Ottoman Turks, which they were broke, no money, no army. It didn't take too long for the Turks to take over. During that time, the late Byzantine era, art is being made, but it's predominantly coming out of Russia. Russia was not taken over by the Ottoman Turks. They consider themselves the third Rome. Yes, because two was not enough. The third Rome. And the most prominent artist is Andrei Rublev. And this is his most popular work, which depicts the Old Testament Trinity. There is depth shown with the faces. They are all identical. The only way you can tell them apart is by the color on their robes. He did choose very bright, vivid colors, which was not normal. You're gonna see with art that follows this era, other artists choosing really bright, bold colors that don't quite go together, like the fact that this orange robe has a blue shadow. That's not how it works, but it's gorgeous to look at. It's bright, eye-catching. It serves its purpose to catch someone's eyes. And like I mentioned, Rome ends up moving to Russia. Russia becomes the third Rome after the fall of Constantinople. And yeah, they try to carry on Christian Roman tradition in Russia for a very long period of time. So in summary, art mediums of Byzantine mosaics, ivories, churches. That would be it. Style, something. Very flat. It's that merge of abstract and naturalism that is off-putting to me. You can like it, I don't care. It's interesting to see happen, but yeah. Sorry, I kept you a minute over. Next week, we're going over the Islamic world on Monday. Look forward to that. I did skip a lot of images. So like I said, this one and this one in particular, really interesting reads. So I would recommend those. They aren't long either, they're pretty short. Remember, you guys have your quiz to do. Yeah, it's not timed.
Cool.
Yeah.
I have it open.
Yeah. I don't think this one's going to take as long as the first one. I got all of the questions on both of these from like the AP exam. Because it's essential questions, like to make sure you understand the subjects. So if you're wondering why I'm asking the questions I am, there's a reason. But yeah, I will see you guys on Monday. Have a good weekend. And if you have any questions, just ask. I'll be working on stuff all weekend. So yeah, just ask. Bye, Grace.
Bye. Sorry about the inconvenience.
Oh no, you were
My
fine.
connection
It was